Hello, everyone. This is the 25th episode of the Soccer Nostalgia Talk podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles, and I'm joined by Paul from Shipley in England. For this episode, we welcome back Mr. Oronde Ash, a former St Vincent and the Grenadines international and assistant coach at North Carolina State University, along with his former national team manager, Mr. Lenny Taylor. Mr. Lenny Taylor is a native Jamaican who actually played at the New York Cosmos in the old NASL in the 70s. He was appointed as St Vincent and Grenadines national team manager in 1993. We will discuss the 1996 CONCACAF Gold Cup adventure of the St Vincent and Grenadines. Some of the events and incidents that we'll discuss, we touched up on our interview with Oronde on our fourth episode, but now we'll go in with more depth as well as the input of Mr. Lenny Taylor. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much for the invite.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oronde, even though we already were introduced on our fourth podcast episode, for the benefit of first-time listeners, can you introduce yourself and talk about yourself?
Okay. I'm the greatest football player alive. I called Cristiano Ronaldo yesterday. He confirmed it. And I'm just trying to get that message out. I'm switching from Puma to Nike, maybe to Reebok. I'm not too sure. So I'm out here. No. Again, the name is Oronde Ash. I was born in the Caribbean island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, moved to the United States when I was 9 years old in 1985 and started playing youth club football for the first time. Then matriculated through the levels of football in the United States, got a scholarship to a Division I university, North Carolina State University, where I played, got my degree, which is more important. And then in the middle of the end of my sophomore season in 1995, I got the invitation from the gentleman here to come down and see if I was a fit for what he was building on the senior national team level back in my country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It was a wonderful adventure. Stories that have stayed with me for 25 years. You know, we, at the time, became the smallest country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to advance to a major FIFA tournament. That is history. That is FIFA history. That is world football history. And my mission in talking on that fourth episode, and now, is to try to relay that history. We're 25 years removed from it, but it's still a powerful story that I think can inspire the world. People are, reimagining what football looks like now with COVID and what it means to us. And it means something to the people in my country, in my island, means something to the world. And as you, with all your episodes, have been trying to relay footballing stories from all over the world and all times, this is one of them. This is what we did, or what Coach Lenny Taylor began doing from 1992 on to 96 is a story worth hearing. So I'm spending this year, as much as I can, trying to relay that story to anybody who wants to listen. And for me, I coached at the college level. I coach youth now, hopefully better the next couple of weeks, because we had a big loss yesterday. And, that's me. That's me.
That's great. I'd just like to say how much I enjoyed the podcast series as well. And it's just a great story. It's obviously centered on soccer, but you managed to weave so much more into it, and it gives us the socio-economic background. There's politics in there, maybe more politics than you'd like.
Right.
But it's just such a good story of soccer and identity, and how soccer can shape identity, personal and national. It's just a fantastic story. So, I'd recommend that. We'll definitely give a link to that and obviously talk some more about it. But yeah, I just found it a really, really powerful story.
I mean, put a gross plug. It's the My Soccer Life podcast with Oronde Ash. That's it. There'll be a link here. But if you get a chance, it's story told in 5 episodes, and we could have told so much more. But I like the fact, Paul, that you recognize that it's not just football. And I think one of the things, if anybody's a regular listener on here, it's more than football. The game is, what's on the field for 90 minutes, but there's so much more that goes into it. A lot of people sometimes wonder why teams underperform. Sometimes it has nothing to do with ability, or why teams overperform. Nothing to do with ability. It's camaraderie. It's love. It's the culture that's in the locker room. I'm going through a divorce with my wife, so I can't perform because I can't think about it. We think about what happened to Atalanta, at least the rumors. I don't know if the rumors are true. With that great player, and I can't remember his name, Shahan, was the lefty that played for Atalanta the last couple of years, one of the best players in Europe right now.
Papu Gomez?
No. But he's an Eastern European gentleman. Lefty, player of the year in Serie A. Either way, he's a lefty. He's 31 years old, coming through his own, one of the best forwards in the world.
Oh, Ilicic?
Yes, but there was a rumor that, I don't know if it's true or not, he went back home to surprise his wife or girlfriend and caught her in bed with another man. So he was not in the Champions League final. And that has nothing to do with football. It's life. Life affects performance. And, I was very glad to, when I went to St Vincent in 95, the gentleman there, Coach Lenny Taylor, that was his mission. It was more than a game. So the story is something that he created. And I'm just happy to tell it, or help tell it.
Mr. Taylor, please tell us about yourself and your football journey.
I will abbreviate it because it's almost 50 years of balling, and make it nice, short, and sweet. I was born in Jamaica, migrated to New York, Brooklyn, New York, at about 15 years old. I played youth soccer, high school soccer, gone to college, gone to Long Island University on a scholarship, played all the amateur soccer, played for New York Inter, semi-pro, finally got drafted my last year of college in the old NASL to the New York Cosmos. Of course, it's the infancy of professional soccer in America. And after a couple of years, I found out that based on the infancy of the game here, for the longevity, there has to be an exit strategy if you want to stay in the game, because there was absolutely no money. So I decided that I would go to the United States National Coaching Schools and remain in the game as a coach. I was 24 years old, and I was an old man then. So to continue navigating being a professional player, for me, didn't make much sense. So in 1978, I earned the A license, and I knew I was 28 years old, and I knew this was it. So I started coaching, and I started at the City University of New York as an assistant coach to a gentleman called Ray Klivecka, who introduced me to the U.S. coaching school at that time. He was an instructor in the program then. And I stayed with him for 3 years. Then I finally get a coaching job of my own at another sister university, City University, called Medgar Evers College. That's 1975. Started from the bottom, build the program from the ground to become a champion in the ECAC Division II, and just continue. And here we are today talking about 45 years of coaching and playing in the United States. And went to South Florida in 1980, started instructing, teaching, coaching courses, the U.S. Soccer D, E, and F license, coaching in youth soccer, and introduced the state of Florida to the first team that played tiki-taka soccer. At that time, it was all kick, run, hustle, and we started using American players, natural-born American players, introduced them to that style of play, and it took off. Now everybody does that in Florida. So that's, in a nutshell, I'm happy to say, and I'm proud to say, I'm the first trained American coach to coach a foreign national team. And when I went to the Caribbean in 92, not to coach a national team, but to coach in the Caribbean Professional Soccer League, Football League, which was a short-lived 3-year program. The program did so well, and St Vincent and the Grenadines asked me now to work with their national team. So that's how I became a national coach.
Thank you. Could you just describe what your initial reaction was when you took on that job, and how did you feel about the challenge that was ahead of you?
Let me begin to say most of the jobs that I've had in coaching was always an uphill climb. At Medgar Evers, it was an uphill climb. We didn't have a field. We didn't have money. Okay. In Florida, the Lauderhill Lions, that's the name of the team, was an uphill climb, teaching American kids a whole different philosophy of playing football. Going to the Caribbean, it was also an uphill climb. There's little or no facilities, and the life is not as cushy as it is in the first world. So I was pretty much seasoned in approaching football in that way. The unique thing with the national program was, I would say 70% of the national team was the professional team that I coached. So there was already a nucleus of players, and I thought I would do well. Nobody else thought that way, but I wasn't daunted by the challenge. In fact, I welcomed the challenge. And from that point to the last day, it's convincing everyone that it can be done.
Mr. Taylor, what were your first impressions of the squad that you had in your hand?
Oh, I was excited because they were all 17 and 18-year-olds with maybe 20% of the team older than 20. Since they have been playing 2 years already for me with this philosophy of playing the Brazilian style, I already had a nucleus. And I think it was easier for me because I was familiar with the kids. I started already to lay down a whole different approach to the game, changed the work ethics, motivated them about the opportunity that football can bring to their life, which is academia, or, that 1% or that 10% may get a chance to play in Europe. They bought into that philosophy, so it kind of made it a little bit easier to bring them into where we need to go.
And from Oronde's podcast, we've learned that you brought a more disciplined approach than the squad had previously. And what was the initial response from the players to that? And when did you start to see the benefits from that approach?
Well, it wasn't easy because it's changing the way they look at the game, the responsibility to be at training time, the responsibility to give 100% every time. It's raining, we still train. The sun is hot, we still have to train. So, of course, there was some resistance because you're changing culture. But my first degree area was marketing, but my second degree area is psychology. So the wonderful mentor that I had, whose name is Professor Julia Mazet, which is Pele's coach and advisor, who is a wonderful man. He taught me that's about 90% of coaching, applied psychology. The X's and the O's are great, but the will of the man. He taught me about working with the inside man, which is more powerful than the outside man. So I was able to mold them. They bought into it. Well, after in the qualification to the Gold Cup run, about the third game, it was against Dominica. And I started to seeing the pieces that's moving and the interlocking of the players and the understanding and the rivalry for trying to get on the starting team it starts to click. So after the third game, when I returned back to St. Vincent's, I told them that this team is going to do extremely well because they were not just playing the football, but they became very good friends. And I had 10 coaches on the field or 11 coaches on the field. So at that point, I knew that this was a unique group, and I think we will do very well. Of course, no one believed at that time.
Oronde, as a player, how do the players respond initially to these changes in discipline and training regimen?
I remember I wasn't there for the initial run. So their Gold Cup run began the spring of 1995 to get to the Caribbean Championship, the Shell Caribbean Cup, in July of 1995. I wasn't a part of the team until December 14th, so later that year. So I can speak to what the atmosphere was like once those connections were generated, and certainly some of the adversities we faced then, and how I think that unity and those connections kind of brought us over the hump. When, if you listen to the podcast, there are days when we're training, getting ready to play in the biggest thing that our island has ever done, and there's no water, there's no food. And this man is scrambling around in between training sessions to go get a goat or to go get provisions, vegetables, just so we can eat. And we wake up and we want to train or we want to play, and there's not this or there's not that. So I can speak to that, and certainly speak to how much, as an outsider, working my way into the group, noticing, all right, he's absolutely right. There are specific leaders. There are people who, I remember an evening when, for whatever reason, we didn't have food for dinner. And one of the older players on the team, a goalkeeper, I believe he was a captain, Fitz Bramble, and maybe 3 or 4 other veterans. And I can't remember if they got money from us or they just got money themselves and went to the next town over, bought probably pasta or something like that, put it in a pot, and we fed ourselves. We fed ourselves because, again, Coach Taylor speaks to, the uphill climb of every step that he's taken in his coaching journey. But St. Vincent is another beast. St. Vincent is another beast. It's a mountainous country. We're literally going up and down all the time. And I think sometimes our politics and our life sort of mirrors the topography and the geography of the island. You're literally stuck. You're stuck. There's just a limit on how far you can go until you literally drown in the ocean. And it takes people with a certain type of vision to try to take what's possible outside the boundaries of the country and say, like he said, we can get there. We can get to a Gold Cup. We can get to a Shell Cup. You can get professional contracts or opportunities to go to college. And you find out in the podcast and listen to the story that of that 22 main players on that 95-96 Gold Cup team, I would say a third of them or more played professionally. That's something unprecedented. We didn't have professional players in St. Vincent up until this era. And it speaks to, again, somebody coming in and sort of expanding the boundaries of our small island, of our country, that it's not the shoreline that's keeping us here. It's the limits of our dreams and the limits of what we think we can do. And the story is about this gentleman coming in and kind of expanding that. And then when you expand something that big, you are at the same time connecting it to what's next. And what we got connected to was not just the next island, St. Lucia, Barbados, Grenada, because in terms of what I thought the players believed, we were beyond that. We were beyond the limits of the Caribbean. And what happened to the third or a quarter of those players, or I don't know, 40, 50% of those players, which they took those dreams and they made it their own, man. And I can speak to one guy in particular, Marlon Tusty James, who was a schoolboy, 17, 18 years old, I think, Coach. Actually, might be 15, 16 when you started with him.
Yes.
Tiny twig of a man. But here's a guy who was, St. Vincent is an archipelago. So there's the main island, St. Vincent, and there are a couple islands off the coast. One big island is called Bequia. This gentleman, Marlon Tusty James, is from Beckway, meaning he's taking a ferry 45 minutes to the mainland at age 16, 17, and as the podcast says, did not play because, quite frankly, he might not have been good enough to play. 2 years, imagine doing that. 2 years getting on a ferry, coming to practice every day, showing up on time because he's drilled and he believes in the discipline that's being created and saying, all right, I know I'm not going to play, but there's something better. There's something better for me. And he ends up being maybe, besides Ezra Hendrickson and Rodney Jack Chang, the most prolific professional footballer in the history of our country, because you got to believe first. You got to believe, then you got to show up, and then you got to do the work. And he did that. So that, for me, that is what Coach Taylor brought, and that is the story of that era of football in my country. Belief, and then action, and then action, and then action, and then, come what may with the result.
And for you personally, Oronde, you were called up when you were still at university. Did that come as a surprise to you, given that you were a physical distance away and might have been a little bit off the radar at that point?
Absolutely. And specifically that year, the fall of 1995, my sophomore year at North Carolina State University, was perhaps the worst footballing year of my life. I didn't play a whole lot. And that happens. You come in as a freshman, you don't know really what's going on. You play some, you don't play some. Sophomore year, you think, all right, I'll just do what I did last year. But what I did the year before wasn't good enough. And there was a younger, hungry player, another freshman from New York, coincidentally, who came in. I don't think he was as talented as me, but he was a worker. He ran, he did everything. He ran around. I'm not saying I couldn't do that, but I wasn't demonstrative about that. I thought my game was more, give me the ball and I'll make something happen. I could chase and do all that, but I hadn't bought into, you just got to do it. And so my playing time suffered my sophomore year. So one, I didn't think I was a good soccer player after that season. I didn't play a whole lot. And I'm going, who the hell is looking at me? This coach is not looking at me at my university. Why would anybody else? So yes, St. Vincent was, far from any thoughts. No idea that the Gold Cup was going on. Maybe I did, but it wasn't in my, direct line of vision. And then Coach Tarantini, rest his soul, passed away last year, brought me into his office and showed me this fax. So long ago, it was a fax. It was a fax telegram from the St. Vincent Football Federation. I still have the letter in my album, inviting me to come down and be a part of this team. And the podcast mentions, obviously, Coach Taylor, said maybe this guy has some chops because he spoke to some of his contacts. As he said, he grew up in New York City, spoke to some contacts in New York. I grew up in New York, so they may have vouched for me as a player. And then the president of the St. Vincent Football Federation at the time was somebody, coincidentally, who had coached me when I was 7, 8 years old back on the island. So again, it speaks to those dreams that I guess he saw something then that said, if he was that good then, he couldn't have fallen off that much if he was playing consistently and still at the college level. So they took a chance, and I'm very fortunate that they did.
Mr. Taylor, how were you alerted of Oronde's availability?
Well, there's a gentleman in New York called by the name of Stanley Harmon, who was my college captain at Medgar College. After he graduated, he became my assistant coach. And after I resigned the job to go to Florida, he became the head coach. But he knew about youth soccer in Brooklyn because I was gone. I was in Florida. And my research through him, he vouched for Oronde, and Oronde had a very good youth participation in Brooklyn, and he encouraged me to go through with that move. On the other hand, if he's playing at North Carolina State, he's gone through the youth system in America. He's bringing that mentality that we need on this team because he could work with the other players when they're in the dorms, when they are outside of training. The discussion among players are normally helpful to a coach or can hurt a coach. I think he could bring more than football to the table. And so I enthusiastically brought him in.
So again, I mean, speaking to that time, in December 1995, I was trying to keep as quiet as possible. Because again, I was hesitant about my abilities following the fall campaign in college. And so I'm there, and I land December 14th. We go straight to camp, and I'm just trying to suss out what's going on. So I'm listening more than talking. But 25 years later, I still have a relationship with Marlon James. You know, whenever I go back to the country every summer to do camps, my reward is after camps are over, I go spend a couple of days on the little island where he lives. It's a paradise called Bequia, white sandy beach, the whole Caribbean postcard thing. And we hang out and we talk. And, you know, he's mentioned to me because we were both young. We were both 18, 19 at the time, 95, 96. And again, he's gone on and had a prolific career, specifically in Malaysia. He's a legend in the Malaysian league. But he mentions, and again, I'm not instilling this. I don't take credit for that because his story, and I'm going to eventually tell his story at some point, but he has incredible work ethic. Again, somebody who takes the ferry 45 minutes back and forth for 2 years, does not see a minute of the field, but still continues to do it. So he wanted something that eventually got on the professional level. But he mentioned to me that, you know, just something as simple as the fact that when I got down there, like I cleaned my boots. Like I didn't know that. When I got to North Carolina State, you know, we were an Adidas school, so we got Copas. I would watch the older players halfway through the week. They would get leather food, basically it's just leather cleaner, and they would sit there and polish their shoes and soften the leather. Things I'd never seen anybody do that. And so when I got down to St. Vincent, I would do that, or something as simple of having multiple long socks, and I would hang them out to dry. And he told me that there was kind of, I guess it speaks to what Coach Taylor was saying, not that I think I was a professional, but there was a certain way of behaving as a footballer that I was used to at North Carolina State and being in, you know, high-level club football, that when I got down there, for him, it was a new look into what he could start doing. And since we were the same age, here is somebody his age doing this, so maybe he could start thinking this way as well. I mean, it used to bother me the first couple of training sessions that, you know, we would get down there as players and the coach would come. So we had about 20 minutes. I'm like, guys, let's warm up. Let's stretch. Let's run. Let's do something. But the guys are just, you know, talking and waiting until the coach gets there, and then they start doing stuff. So I was used to a certain different reality. NC State, we're on the field at 3:30. Coach comes at 4 o'clock. We're taking care of ourselves for those half an hour to get ready. When the coach shows up, we're ready to go. And so it's those little things, not monumental things. And I didn't have any conversations with people about professional or even college, I think, because I was real nervous. I wanted to keep as quiet as possible, kind of just blend in. But those lessons and those things still get transmitted based on, you know, what you do and what you used to and who you are. So absolutely.
Mr. Taylor, just going back to the earlier years ahead of the Gold Cup, at what point did you feel that the team had the potential to reach that level? Was the Gold Cup always a target, or was that something that evolved as you were moulding that team together?
The Gold Cup was a target. I know that cup was also important because May-June 96, the MLS was going to begin. And I know if we got to the Gold Cup, we would be able, hopefully, a player or two would be able to get into the MLS, and those players could be positive role models for the other kids on the island. After the Dominica game, I know that I had something special. You could feel it, And we started beating teams 6, 7, 8, 9. I understood by then that in order to be successful in the Caribbean, the final third, you must change the whole mentality in playing in the final third, because they're tremendous athletic, strong, fast, will defend well, pretty good in midfield, but horrible in the final third, because the culture emphasizes the entertaining type of playing more so than the purposeful part of playing. So I had to change that. And so my practice, my training were final third, finishing. So we were okay now in scoring goals, and we were fit, we were strong, they were buying into the philosophy. So defense didn't become pretty difficult to organize them. And in the podcast I spoke about some sports reporter from Barbados called over to St. Vincent now that we had qualified to get to the Caribbean Championship, which is the final qualification to the Gold Cup. At that time, nobody in the Caribbean, we were just like, as Bob Marley says, we were like a bomb in a church. Yeah, we were just so ready. And he says, well, what do you think your chances are? So I said, as good as any. And the guy is like, he didn't say it, but his attitude, what are you, stupid? How are you going to win the Caribbean Cup? We got Trinidad, we got Jamaica, we've got Cuba. What's up with this guy? So, no, it was the best kept secret. And Jamaica, who is the Caribbean, never made the Gold Cup. They got knocked out. So, yes, it was the best kept secret. And I thought that also gives us the opportunity to surprise our opponents and qualify. So the target of the Gold Cup, I think that the reason why we did not win the Caribbean Cup was the fact that we targeted qualification to the Gold Cup. That's something I say that's a coaching problem. I knew that at that point, just getting there, we would have get over, but we could have won it. But my emphasis and the mental motivation was the qualification. And for us, that was what we needed for the exposure for the players. So, yes, I just think we took everyone by surprise.
Plus, the night before the finals of the Gold Cup, let's be honest here, half the team goes out to a club. And Coach Lenny and manager Arnold Dalrymple has to go and get them, because they're right. The idea was just making it to the final was good enough to qualify to the Gold Cup, which was the main goal. So all you got to do is make it to the final, which they did, make the final against Trinidad. Lost 4-0 in the final. So the night before, the players celebrated, and maybe celebrated a little too early. Can I ask you guys, Paul, specifically, you mentioned listening to it, what about the podcast or the story from a non-soccer perspective, and you too, Shahan, was an interesting, because I know the story, he knows the story, but I'm always curious as to how other people take it in, how other soccer people take it in.
It's a nice human story of, like you said, a group just living together, achieving their goals together, and just a whole background to everything, and all the stories that we touched up previously and will touch up again, all the things you had to overcome with the politics that were kind of out of your hands. So all these are interesting stories, and probably happens more often than we think. Yeah, I just like the whole story as from beginning to end, as far as how this adventure started and everything in between.
Yeah, it's really a picture of the whole background, the culture, like I say, the sort of socio-economic perspective even of it. It's just a real insight and all pulled together around the football and the characters involved. You know, it's a really great, shows the power of football really in a really positive way, obviously for the individuals involved and for a small nation.
Are we like Leicester 2015 or something
like that?
Different?
Yeah. Well, I would interject this major point, which needs to be considered. This was before the FIFA subsidy began. So there was absolutely no financial support, not even from the private sector or the government, because they didn't see it was possible to achieve. And to be able to get, first being at 90 in the world on the FIFA list, and then 95, breaking on the 100 mark, first as a small territory in the region, with the challenges that we had, I think these kids really did a wonderful job. They overachieved. And only the first or the second place in 95 could come to the Gold Cup. Today, you get 5 or 6 teams from the Caribbean that goes to the Gold Cup. So I think it's a special time. It's special kids, and I'll forever love these kids because of what they did. And my respect to them, tremendous, because they achieved without nothing. They had nothing, but they achieved.
Again, that story again, there'll be a link there. It's the My Soccer Life podcast with Oronde Ash. There'll be a link somewhere. And I know, Sean, you're in LA. Any producers in LA that want a story that will captivate the world when people are looking for soccer, we got one. And Paul, you know, BBC, bang, 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 bang. We're ready for you. We want the calls from the BBC to come down and do a documentary. I'll even let Jamie Vardy play me. You put on a jet wig, and Jamie Vardy can play me. Oh, no, I take it back. Raheem Sterling. I don't know if I can let anybody run like that for me, but if he can ball, he can play me. You already said David Oyelowo, Paul. David Oyelowo from Selma is going to play a very young Coach Lenny Taylor there.
Yeah, I like it. And also, Mr. Taylor, at that point, how did you go about scouting and observing the players for the national team? We're talking pre-internet. That must have presented a bit of a challenge as well for you.
Well, again, going back to the base of the team, the nucleus was Haroon Lions, which was the professional team on the island. But I broke the mold of having players playing for the national team just from the central corporate area. I went to the highways and the byways of the country. I looked under every rock to try to find players with the potential that we could work with. So consequently, I think that was the first national team that had the outlining districts, players from the outlining districts that played on the team. And I made sure that I would be able to see as much as I possibly can before just accepted what was presented to me as the players. So maybe that was also part of the contention because some of the corporate area players were left out. For some of those outlining district players, because they had some of the characteristics that I was looking for.
Just in layman's terms, in the capital of St. Vincent is Kingstown. Our country is about 110,000 people. Kingstown has 20,000. And so anybody from Kingstown thinks traditionally they're better. It's like somebody from New York or London or Paris. You're from the capital. You think you have a little higher status. And the conceit for any kind of national team And is that most of the players typically come from Kingstown. And so when I went there in 95, yeah, I remember there were players from the interior of the country, which it's mountainous there. Literally, there's not a lot of flat field area. So nobody is thought of as being able to develop football. But I saw good players in camp for those 2 weeks that I was there, from the interior, from the windward part of the island, which is considered country, and country people don't know how to play soccer. I saw ballers from the country. And like he said, Coach Taylor said earlier, that competition was there because the country guys are trying to prove that they belong. And the Kingstown guys, the guys from the central area, were trying to say, no, you don't belong. And all that does is allow cream to rise and rise and rise and rise. It wasn't contentious. It was competitive. It was ultra competitive because at the end of the day, all of us are not eating and drinking properly. So we're all in the same boat. But when we go out and play 2 or 3 times a day, there is an attitude of I've got to prove myself, or I've got to prove that I'm better than. And like Coach Taylor said, there were people outside of our circle who, because it was something different, they rejected something different. They rejected him because he was different. They rejected a player that he brought in who went on to become the most successful player in the history of our football. And he's an assistant coach in the MLS right now, and he's got all the certificates and all the accolades and all the awards to justify why he belonged there on the 1995-96 team. But at the time, speaking, Shahan, about the politics that you kind of allude to, he was hated. People go, why? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Well, we're doing that because it's going to work for us, and it's going to work for our country. And Coach Taylor is proven right.
Let's mention that young man name.
Ezra Hendrickson. I'm sorry. Coach Ezra Hendrickson.
And he's got about 3 MLS rings and over 12 years playing in the MLS, has an A license, has a professional license, and now an assistant coach in the league, and was recruited at the Gold Cup. So if even one person, we achieved our objective. And now he's a role model for the rest of the kids on the island. And someone could say, well, I'd like to be like Ezra Hendrickson because he went out and he got it done. So we have been successful in the manner in which we were able to arouse the curiosity of the young people on the island. So today, they're still knocking at the door to become outside professionals.
And again, one of the reasons that I'm so adamant about telling this story, and again, Shahan, I appreciate the opportunity to tell it again, is, quite frankly, I don't think the young people in the country know what happened 25 years ago. You know, just the state of our politics. And so things happen really fast. Things happen really fast in the political cycle in the United States, in the media culture here. So we're conditioned to forget. So, but in our country, I think, because we're so small and we haven't made the cultural impact that a Jamaica has with Bob Marley, or Trinidad has with soca music, or St. Lucia, Grenada, or whatever, I don't think sometimes we think we're important. But 25 years ago, we did something monumental from the depths, from absolutely nothing. And I know the power of stories. The reason you have this podcast, Shahan, the power of a story is to inspire people to want to do better. And for 25 years, there's no reason why our nation's football should not have been back in the Gold Cup in that time. And the story is a reminder of what we were able to do. It ain't, okay, I take it back. I was going to say it ain't hard. No, it was hella hard. And Coach Taylor can speak to that. It was hella hard, but it wasn't impossible. And like you said, there's FIFA money now. The road is easier. If we traditionally weren't able to connect with even the outer boroughs or the outer areas of the island, well, you can do it now. There's the internet. You call people, boom, boom, boom. You can see video. You don't have to go ride 2 hours if you don't want to in the mountains, go scout somebody. He can send you a tape of his game in theory, and you can see what's going on. But the story is important. The story is important to inspire, because we can become Ezra Hendrickson. We can become Marlon Tusty James, who's another story that needs to be told. We can become Lenny Taylor and have a career that maybe not playing the game, but coaching the game, teaching the game, transforming the lives of people in Florida, in Brooklyn, in the Caribbean, and making an impact. So, my country has done stuff. The people in my country have done stuff, specifically the footballers in my country have done something. And they need to be reminded of that so we can do it again and again and again and again and again. Because as coaches, that's us. We're not satisfied. Wonderful, you scored. Great. Can you do it again tomorrow? Can you do it again next week? Because we need you to do that over and over and over again.
Oronde, let's talk more about your podcast where you narrate the team's journey. When did you decide to do it, and how did you go about finding all the participants from this memorable past?
My first conversation was with the then football president, I believe, Ian Sardine, in the spring of this year. And maybe it was COVID inspired, there's nothing going on. And so you had this story in the back of your head for 25 years. And it was coming up on the 25th anniversary. I take it back. I'm going to go back. I think last year, Coach Taylor posted a video that some media company made about their couple days in the Cayman Islands. It might have been a FIFA video, Coach. I'm not too sure. About what happened in the Cayman Islands at the Shell Caribbean Championships in 1995. So he posted it, and it was also a message at the end that he narrated encouraging our current national team, because they were on the road to qualifying for the Gold Cup. And they were close. We can get into that. That's another story. But he was encouraging them to just keep going, because we did it before, so we can do it again. And then I remembered it's 25 years, and 25 years is like an important marker. I think it's a silver anniversary. And quite frankly, I know after dealing with the Football Federation in my country for 25 years, they're not going to tell this story. They're not going to. It's not in their mentality to see the potential of just relaying this. And so, as I've done for much of my adult life, and again, knowing what we did as a team, going back to that Gold Cup experience, if we didn't have people funding us or giving us things, we just try to do it ourselves, right? And so I know I can tell a story. I've done podcasts. I've done videos. Why am I waiting for somebody to tell the story that I can tell? And in terms of access to the people, I've kept in touch with these folks for the past 25 years. I see the Football Federation president, Ian Sardine, every summer when I go back. We are working kind of together in youth development in the country. Marlon Tusty James, I see every summer when I go back. And it speaks to what the culture that Coach Taylor created 25 years ago, that I'm still in contact with these guys. I know St. Vincent is a small place, and it's easier to keep those bonds when the distances between people is not as broad and not as big. But Shahan, these people they've been part of my life. They've continued to be part of my life for 25 years. It was just convincing them, look, I know most people don't like to sit down and talk, and you might not think this is important, but I'll guide you. I'll set it up, and all you got to do is answer some of these questions. So probably each interview took 2 to 3 hours to get in, and then it was chipping away at the things that are not necessary, and then trying to tell the story itself. And the story, like you said, is not the football. The story is everything but the football. Michelangelo said, I am not Michelangelo. But Michelangelo said, David, the statue of David was in the marble. All he did was got rid of anything that wasn't David. And so I think a lot of times when telling stories, people think, I got to bring up this beautiful. No, most of the time, you just got to get rid of the fluff, and the story presents itself. And so quite honestly, if you ask me now, like how I thought about I don't know. I just did it. I did it because it's what I'm used to, it's what I'm practicing. Did I sketch out and plan? And if you look, there are storyboards with things and connections and things that I have to say. And even the conversation with Coach Taylor, I had to do it twice because it was my first conversation using Zoom. And the first one I did, I wanted video, but I did it on my phone. because the video looked better on my phone and I wasn't familiar with Zoom. I'm like, but then what happened was after 2.5 hours, I realized I didn't get any of the audio. And so I had to have the conversation over again, trying to weave certain themes back in. And then we ad-libbed and did some other things. So I had an idea of what I wanted to get to. But then kind of like football, you let it happen. You want to play this way, but you got to shift and make some different changes. And it's the power of the story itself. The story is damn good. I just got to get rid of all the stuff that's not the story. And the product on there, on the podcast, is what it is. And I hope people take a chance and listen to it.
The video that, Oronde, you're alluding to, that was a British program. They went to Jamaica to film the magazine show because they thought Cuba, Jamaica, and Trinidad, who was in that round, they would have the best footage and the best story for that magazine show. The magazine show was called Trans World International. And they did it for Gold TV. And the guys were out of England. So that's where that video came from. And they had a magazine show that showed world football. So the Caribbean Cup was a segment of that episode, which went 80 countries around the world in all different languages. Trans World International.
I'm assuming we were going to be like a footnote. This is the team that Jamaica beat, or this is the team that Trinidad beat. Oh, look at them! Oh, they were on the beach. I can now imagine. Oh my God, I can imagine that these party boys were on the beach because the footage shows us playing volleyball on the beach and all that stuff. So it's going to be good for them. They tried. They just playing beach, but they got overrun by the big countries.
So when Cuba won and came to Cayman for the semifinal and final of the tournament, the TV latched onto us and they followed us everywhere, to eat everywhere, because they realized that there was a tremendous human interest story and a football story. So that's where that video came. That's a little part out of the video. And the whole video is half an hour. And it's quite interesting because it's talking about the English Premier League. It's talking about the Spanish League. It's talking about the German League and the Caribbean Cup in the Caribbean. So it's all segments of that magazine show. So Sean, you can run that down if you're in England there.
Yeah, I'd love to find that. I had heard there was Trans World Sport. I wonder if it was kind of a division of that. I'll definitely have a look into it.
I think it's a division of that.
Yeah.
It was Trans World International, and this is a half an hour magazine show that showed on Gold TV, and it's world football. And probably I'm the only person who has a piece of that because the producers promised me, and I begged them, please, could you let me have a copy? But then it played on Gold TV in America. So their footage is out there. Footage is out there.
Is that Football Mondial Weekly? Is that show? That was
Say that again. Yes.
Football Mondial Weekly.
Show.
Oh,
that's
I remember now. I remember.
That's the show.
Oh, you got to hunt. You see, Shahan has all the old footage from everywhere. You got to hunt that. How many tapes? Tell people, how many tapes do you have?
If you remember.
20,000?
Yeah, if you remember, more than that, but yeah.
20,000 games.
But if you remember that Football Mondial Weekly, that was shown on, you might remember this, Oronde. Remember the old MSG network?
Yes.
I think it was shown on Saturdays. Maybe like 94, 95 around then.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. I mean, it's excellent. Top players are in there.
Yeah.
We are this little team from this 107,000 population country with this dream of going to the Gold Cup was featured in that video, in that film.
So possibly might even have it. I don't. Wow.
Yeah.
You
I'll
might,
have to look.
you
I'll
might,
have to
you
search
might,
through. Yeah.
you might.
Search through my archives.
It was somewhere in the fall in '95. It was
Oh,
shown.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good show. I remember. Yeah. As far as the many stories that you discuss in your podcast, and we were discussed it before in our previous podcast, episode 4, there's some that stand out, such as the whole story about not having food while in the camp, your bus being stopped for an erroneous drugs suspicion, practicing in a park while you're a qualified nation in a Gold Cup. Can you talk more about what would seem like unbelievable stories for a national team, but it's part of the journey as far as St. Vincent story for this CONCACAF Gold Cup?
I'll let the coach talk, because after being a coach for 20 years now, you see all the frustrations in going about and doing the things you can control. And then you get to where you want to go, and then there are things that are outside your control. So I'll let the man talk about these things.
Well, what can I tell you? Everywhere in the world have its own politics. And when people think that you cannot achieve and you prove them wrong that you can, it sometimes irritates them. And that irritation sometimes comes out very negatively, where the inter-politics sometimes would like to prevent you from even achieving more. I do believe that internally in the country, there are folks who just was not supportive of us being successful. We proved them wrong. We got to the Caribbean Cup. We qualified for the Gold Cup, probably the most historical thing the country has ever done. And getting to the Gold Cup now, which is a FIFA tournament, I thought there were a few distractors just try to put some stones in our way. And we stepped around them. We had obstacles from day one. It's nothing new. But this was the extreme. And going to the highest tournament that the country has ever participated in, I thought it was pretty childish. If it was an accident or accidentally done by purpose, whatever it is, it was pretty childish. And we got around that, we got over that, and we continued on our journey. So that's with the bus. I was not on the bus. I was driving a Jeep, I think either ahead or behind. And I was astonished to find out that that took place on the way to go to a exhibition match to prepare for the Gold Cup. I think like everything else, if you delve on these negative things, it tends to spoil the story. So I kicked it to the curb and continue on the goal of getting to the Gold Cup, exposing the players, and do the best that we could. Okay, so that's with that. For the food, we know how difficult it was. We just didn't have food. And I told the players, you're not going to let this stop you from your goal. We'll grab, we'll scratch, we'll do whatever we can. But this should not be an excuse to say that you have failed. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. So we fought through these difficulties, painfully, of course, but we fought through them. It brought us a little bit closer together, and we knew that we were in it by ourselves, and the team is as strong as its weakest link. So it forced us to stick together, and we got there. We did what we have to do, and the rest is history.
Yeah, Shahan, you mentioned again, you speak of us training in, quite frankly, a parking lot, like in a cement parking lot when we got to the Gold Cup. I honestly, Coach, I do not remember if it was a week or 10 days. I do not remember those 10 days in California. Maybe it's some part of me is blocking them out. I do remember putting on the uniform, being in the locker room, getting ready to play Mexico and Anaheim. I remember playing Guatemala, and the stadium was full, 20, 30, 40,000 people, because the U.S. was playing Trinidad next. So the stadium was filling up, not to watch us, but to get ready to watch them. I remember the hotel. The hotel was wonderful. The hotel was great. We, again, going for a couple of weeks of not eating and running hard to get into a hotel where you know there's breakfast, you know there's lunch, and you know there's dinner was a tremendous comfort. And so I remember that. I don't remember training. And it wasn't until speaking with you that I got some light on the difficulty of that, and the difficulty of being a small fish in a pond where at the Gold Cup, the Brazil under-23 team is there. The Mexico team who just competed in the 1994 World Cup is there. Trinidad is there, and Trinidad is under the umbrella of Jack Warner, who was at that time one of the most powerful people in FIFA. And so they're getting whatever they want. Everybody's getting whatever they want. And St. Vincent was just invited to the party. They just happened to make it here. And so was part of it naivety on our part as a coach at a university level? Yes, I understand. Like, I've got to make some calls to prepare for things to happen so that they happen for my team. I know I've got to do that. And I think there was some expectation that either Jack Warner, CONCACAF, or FIFA would take care of certain things. And to be honest, there was just not the money. To get a bus, one of those big charter buses, 40 to 64 seats. And I made a call when I was doing the podcast. I made a call to a bus company in North Carolina. I said, if I wanted to go to Virginia is a 3-hour drive from where I'm living. How much would it cost for a weekend? It was like $4,000, $5,000 just for the bus. And then you got to pay for the room, for the driver, and all that stuff. We didn't have that in our budget. So a bus to carry us around, to go to this field and train, that just was not possible. Could we have gotten vans and things like that? Maybe. But we weren't thinking like that because this was still new to us. And we thought perhaps, in speaking to the president, Mr. Ian Sardine, that these things would have been taken care of. And they just weren't. So we ended up training in a parking lot to get ready to play against the Mexican national team or Guatemala. I'm not too sure. Or, we can't go on the field. I didn't know this before we played Mexico. For whatever reason, we're not allowed on the field. How's that possible? How is that possible that we're in a locker room? And now that I think about it, I remember I don't like coffee. I didn't like coffee at the time because I didn't want it to bother me. But I remember January in California, in San Diego, for some reason I felt chilly. Or maybe it was nerves. And I'm in the locker room and I needed something to pick me up. And there was, like a coffee maker there. So I had black coffee thinking that I just would need it to get warm and as a stimulant. Maybe I needed the coffee because we weren't warming up. We were warming up before the game. So it's all those things that tell you, again, the product on the field a lot of times is more than just the touches and the passes and the X's and O's. And exactly what you said, Paul and Shahana, these stories happen more than you think for the 200 plus countries that are in FIFA, man. It's not that people can't play or don't want to play. It's everything else. Like Michelangelo stripping away everything to get David. There's just a lot of freaking stuff to get rid of. And sometimes it's just undaunting.
Well, I'll chime in on that and speak very diplomatic. From our region, we prevented some of the bigger teams to get to the Gold Cup. And politically, that wasn't politically correct. But we could not be denied. And the people who were in power positions just saw us as not very, you have to be there, but not very important. And certain things were not given to us because you just St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You should be here. And I thought that was part of the back then CONCACAF politics, which I refused to go into. And the fact that some of our problems that we had was not self-inflicted. It was orchestrated even from outside of St. Vincent and the Grenadines as a way in preventing the cream to come. You said coffee, so I use that. The cream from the bottom to come up top in the coffee. We were not supposed to do this. We moved 44 places on the FIFA list in 1 year. That was not supposed to happen. So there were politics inside and outside the region, which I don't want to go into, but there's much more to this story.
Which is strange because they usually prop up all these Cinderella stories, you would think.
I would think. You would think. You would think. You would think. You would think. But, you know, going to a big tournament like this means money. And it means money to the big sharks in the region. And I think that our football and our football accomplishment became problematic to the big sharks. So consequently, we were somewhat punished a little bit for being there because we're not supposed to be there. There's more to that story another time.
Now I'm thinking back. I think St. Vincent now that I think about it, should take credit for Jamaica making the 1998 World Cup. And they were embarrassed by what happened in 95. So we did that. We got Jamaica to the 1998 World Cup because they said, never again. Never again.
It's quite interesting. Quite interesting. This is why I respect the kids with so much obstacle to accomplish so much. And the half still has not yet been told.
True that. But in the meantime, click the link, listen to the podcast. Take some time, 5 episodes, listen to it.
Mr. Taylor, after all those preparations, can you describe the matches at the Gold Cup and the experience of being there?
Yes. In a continuation of getting to San Diego to play our first game against Mexico, let's take one step back. Getting to the Caribbean Championship in the Cayman, we had one set of uniform. Every time we play, we had to wash it so we can use it for the next game. Okay? We were picked up by a company after qualifying for the Gold Cup as a sponsor. God bless their souls. We probably would have to use that same uniform at the Gold Cup. Anyhow, the uniforms arrived at the hotel the morning of our game against Mexico. There was no shoes that came with the equipment. We thought the boots would have arrived also. There was no shoes. So on our way to San Diego driving the bus, we had to stop at a soccer store to purchase shoes for half of the kids. Okay, so going out and playing against Mexico, some kids had the shoes on that they never practiced in. They just, from the store on their feet onto the field. It was a tremendous education playing against top players. We ran around a little bit and sometimes chasing the ball. I think the hugeness of the occasion overwhelmed us. And we didn't play as well as we could. 40,000 people in the stands, Viva Mexico, Viva Mexico. And with all the interesting details that I have just described, it makes it difficult. We were just out of sorts. And we were grateful for the players to get that education against Mexico. Yeah. So it was not one of our customary matches that we usually played. And that was our first international baptism in football. And for me, from a coaching point of view, I've learned a tremendous amount. And that I was able to carry on to the rest of my career. And I'm sure that the players had that same experience also.
This is a question for both of you. When this adventure was over, was there a feeling that you or subsequent generations can build on this? Or was there a feeling that this was an extraordinary adventure that would be impossible to reproduce?
I'll answer first. I saw it as we've accomplished our goal, what we set out to do. We were overwhelmed at times, but I knew if one or two players were identified for a career in football, it would have done so much for us. And for me, I wouldn't have let the players down, because we told them if they work hard, if they stick to itiveness, and they put everything in there, there's a rainbow at the end. So for me, it was a relief that we were able to accomplish this as a group. I had resigned at the end of the Gold Cup because I needed to be back home in the US. And imagine, man, we have gone through a couple of cyclones, hurricanes, earthquakes, and still survived. And I personally thought that I have done as much as I could. There's a group of an average age of 22 players, and the country would have a base to continue their football. So that's how I felt at the end of the Gold Cup.
And for me as a player, and again, I'm 19 years old at the time in January 1996, about to turn 20 in February of that year, and coming off of a tremendously disappointing fall sophomore year in college, my focus was then, all right, how do I kind of redeem and reprove myself on the college level? And I wasn't thinking too much about more opportunities with the national team. And I wish I had more opportunities to go down. But again, like Coach Taylor said, he left. And obviously when a new regime comes in, they probably want to start new. They do their own thing. So I wasn't part of the national team program, again, until Coach Taylor came back in 2000 to qualify for the 2002 Korea, Japan. And honestly, at the university level, my year was very regimented. From August to November, we're playing. December, I'm thinking about academics and finals. Christmas, I want to go home with my family, and I'm back to school in January. And it's very regimented until we leave in May. And honestly, in the summertime is my only chance to make money. Summertime, you work camps, you do things to make money. And so I'm like taking a couple of weeks off to go to the Caribbean. I'm losing money. And I was not. Nobody had ever called me back. It just wasn't part of whatever plans there were. I can answer the question, Shahan, based on the last 10 years of my experiences running my Adari 360 grassroots program on the island and seeing firsthand the tremendous amount of talent that there is down there, as there is in most of the Caribbean. Coach Taylor alluded to the fact that we have athletes. I made a joke about talking off camera about my experiences coaching yesterday, that athletic ability helps. It helps fill in some of the gaps that sometimes technique and a more tactical understanding of what to do might mask, or a more tactical and technical understanding might enhance. And that's what Coach Taylor did with us from 92 to 95. Put a roadmap on top of these Lamborghinis, and you saw what happened. So there's tremendous amount of talent down there. What is missing is the structure. And I think more than anything, and what this podcast speaks to, what this story speaks to, is the belief. You got to believe something. You got to see it first. You got to see it. You got to see that it's possible. It's what he did for 2 years with his Hyroon Lions. Made those kids believe, okay, stick with me. We can get you a professional contract. Stick with me. You can get a chance to go to college. Something. Believe. You got to believe in something. And that's what's been missing for the past 25 years. but the talent level for the elite players on the island has not changed. There's some tremendous talent there that would give, if given the opportunity in the right context, can shine anywhere in the world. So can we get back to the Gold Cup? Absolutely. Now talk about the World Cup? Maybe not. But Gold Cup, absolutely. Kids going to college? Absolutely. And I think that should be the focus moving forward for the next 25 years.
That's fantastic. I mean, for both of you, you've touched on this throughout, but it sounds like you had a really strong group and that you've more or less kept in touch over the years. For both of you, how do you look back on that Gold Cup experience? I know, Oronde, that's the essence of your podcast, but if you could summarize that experience for both of you.
I'll let the man. I won't say his words. I'll let the man speak his words, and I'll
wonderful experience. For me, I got to sit in meetings with people like Zagallo. Zagallo is always, five World Cup rings with a history of the Brazilian football. I was in awe just to be in the same room around the same conference table with the coaches of the different countries and seeing how the game is played on that level, not from television, but from being there, has been a tremendous learning experience for me. And the fanfare of the tournament, and it allows me to learn things that I could not learn in coaching school. And I've gone to quite a few. Those practical things you have to see with your eyes. So for me, it's something I always can look back on. It helps me now to be able to prepare better, to get to a humongous tournament like that. You have to be there to get that type of experience. So I personally want to thank Ian Sardine and his Football Federation, St Vincent and the Grenadines, to give me the opportunity to gain this knowledge, to gain this wisdom, to gain this insight that I probably would not be able to have. And this will go with me wherever I go to coach, because I've seen very close to the highest level in football intimately. So I consider that a fortunate opportunity that you can't buy. I'm very, very thankful because my other jobs after that this experience has prepared me to be successful there. So I am nothing but thankful, and we hope that St. Vincent and the Grenadines can get back there again. I pray that they can, because if we do it under such trying circumstances, they ought to be able to accomplish that now.
And for me, I'll just tell a story that happened recently to me. I'm walking in the neighborhood with my 1-year-old daughter, Marley, and we come upon a van of a worker who's doing something at a neighbor's house. And the guy sees that I have on football garb because I'm just dressed like a coach all the time. I've got my Adidas stuff on. So we stop, we start talking. He's Mexican. He's talking in his broken English. I'm talking in my broken Spanish, but we're communicating. Why? Because we're communicating over football, right? And so we're talking, and I say, yeah, I'm a coach. He says, oh, I have a son. My son plays. My son, he's not too serious about it, but I will want him to get serious about it. Do you do anything? I say, yeah. I sometimes coach some kids in the neighborhood I live in just, because they want to. And I'm like, if your son ever wants to come, he's more than, let him come and we'll see what happens. And so to prove who I am and what I do, I kind of casually mentioned the 1996 Gold Cup. And I mentioned that we played against Mexico, and he's Mexican. And I go on YouTube and I pull up the video. And his eyes just go like, holy, this is a guy, blah, 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 blah. Now, honestly, We got shelled by Mexico 4-0. 5-0. We lost to Guatemala 3-0. As a footballer, did I think that I did anything in the Gold Cup in 1996? Not really. Not really. But it's the perspective of other people and what that experience might mean to somebody who always wanted to have it. And I think that's what's happened in the past 25 years. The meaning of it has grown because sometimes when you're in the middle of it, fighting all these fights and going through all these struggles, you don't have the perspective to recognize what you did. We were the smallest country to qualify for a major FIFA tournament. We made a major FIFA tournament. There's boys and girls all over the world who just want to get on the team. We not only got on the team, we made a major FIFA tournament. We made history. And then when I saw that in his eyes, and I saw him the next day because he was doing construction and he was there all the time. And he's like, man, I told my friends that I'm speaking to an international. And, somebody's never called me an international. And so, again, his son shows up to this coaching sessions that I do. I work with him. And his son says, yeah, my son's on this team, but the coach, he might not know what's going on. I'm like, no worries, don't worry. Just don't have to pay me anything. Just bring the kids. I'll work with them. So yesterday, Saturday, and it's raining here in Raleigh for the past 3 days. My only free time to work with these 15-year-old boys was 7:15 in the morning. I told them, if you guys are serious about this, you'll be at the field at 7:15. It is raining. The field is muddy. These kids live, some of them 30, 45 minutes away. Some of them are taking the time off from working at 15 for these Spanish families. Mom, dad, show up, drive them to this field at 7:00. And I'm working with these kids, not because I'm their coach, not because they're my team, but because I like coaching. Why? Because somebody like a Lenny Taylor showed me what it means to be a coach and transform lives. Or Sam Carrington, or Ralph Bavaro, or Lenny Ferraro when I was 9 years old. So, the connection started with showing the guy a video. Oh, I once played in the Gold Cup. But what's happened from that is now I see in those kids' eyes this spark of, I got somebody who at least comes off knowing what the hell they're doing. And so I will show up at 7:00 on a Saturday for a 15-year-old to show up for a guy that you don't have to give a damn about. They did. And then they're asking me, when are you doing this again? Because we will drive 45 minutes to come work with you, even though you're not our coach. And the coach showed up because he saw that I'm not a competition. I already have my own teams, but I like doing this. I like making an impact in the lives of people. And I'm going to continue to do this as best as I can. And so they'll show up. If I tell them 5:30 next Saturday, they will be there. They were all there ready to work. The last 10 years, I've been going back to St Vincent because I want this same possibility to happen for the kids there. So for me, the legacy of the Gold Cup is not, making it back there per se, but it's being able to tell the story, to impact the lives, definitely in St. Vincent. But as an aside, this Gold Cup story just got me into a relationship with another group of kids who are at 15, want to learn soccer, want to get better at it, and more importantly, they want to go to college. They have no idea what the process is like. So now we're setting up meetings with families in like 3 or 4 weeks so we can talk about the college process and how they can get there, because I think they can. Maybe not D1, but they can get somewhere. And then the story continues because their lives get impacted, their lives change, their American dream becomes more real, and then they can perpetrate that story on for somebody else, like Coach Taylor did for me, and now I'm doing the same thing for somebody else. So that's the Gold Cup for me.
In closing, in addition to your coaching, recently you've been active with your podcast, and I've also seen you recently in YouTube interviews. Are there more social media activities on the horizon for you?
Yes, I want to do a part 2 of telling the story of my island's football. I briefly mentioned, I think in the first episode, that a lot of the players in 1992 in St. Vincent immigrated to Brooklyn, New York. So there was a dearth of talent. Then Coach Taylor had to come in, fill in that space, and kind of rejuvenate the program. So I want to tell the story of the thriving ethnic league, specifically the Caribbean League in Brooklyn, one that Coach Taylor probably played in, certainly coached and saw, one that his friend, Stan Harmon in Brooklyn, would be familiar with, one that I kind of played in. So there were these thriving ethnic leagues in New York City pre-MLS, and I don't think, even if they exist now, the aura about them is probably not the same. But you can make good money in the 70s and 80s, a couple $100s on a weekend for playing for the Hungarian team, then going playing for the Polish team, and going playing for the Italian team. And a lot of the guys in St. Vincent that migrated to New York City, they survived that way. Besides their Monday through Friday construction job or whatever they did, they were making hundreds more dollars on the weekends playing in these leagues. So I want to tell that story, because these leagues were the de facto national teams in the Caribbean. I will say it. I think in that time, in the 80s and early 90s, some of the best Caribbean footballers in the world were playing in these leagues, specifically in Brooklyn, 5-minute walk from where I lived. And so I'd love to tell that story. There are other stories of, Marlon Tusty James. He and I have talked about a book, but I think it'd be a nice, 45-minute documentary on him, the things that he had to do. Again, that ferry ride, 45 minutes back and forth for 2 years not playing, and then becoming one of the most storied professionals in the country. And then Ian Sardine, who was the president of the Football Federation, has been in 1995 and gave Coach Lenny Taylor the opportunity and remembered me and invited me back. He's been at this for close to 50 years in the country, without money, without a whole lot of things, but he continues to do it. I don't think, I hesitate as to how much longer he can still do it, but I'd like to tell his story, to leave a lasting legacy, to inspire somebody else to go, I can do that there. I don't have to be a foreign person with a degree or whatever. He's there on the island, just a guy that saw an opportunity and saw a need and then decided to fill it for the past 50 years. And now he's getting kids to go on to college over the past 4 years. 15, 20 kids are going and having opportunities to go to college and transforming their lives. So those are a couple of things I'd like to do in the next couple of years.
And with that, we can wrap. Once again, I would like to thank you, Oronde, and thank you, Mr. Taylor, for your participation in this interview. As always, feel free to leave questions and comments. For any questions and comments, you can contact me on Twitter at SP1873 and my blog, Soccer Nostalgia, and on Facebook under Soccer Nostalgia. Mr. Paul Whittle can be contacted at 1888 letter. And I've linked on this blog posting and Spotify posting all your YouTube information, your Facebook address, your Twitter at Oronde Ash, and your podcast, My Soccer Life with Oronde Ash. The Spotify link is on the posting. So, and I urge everyone to listen to the episodes of your podcast, Reliving this 1996 Gold Cup adventure. Now, to finish off with something personal. Oronde, our interview with you on our 4th podcast was the first interview that me and Paul ever did.
Whoa.
That interview.
Do I get like a shirt? Do I get a commemorative shirt or a bottle of Dom Perignon or something? Or maybe some haggis from England? Do I get something as that guy?
As Paul said in that interview, we're like the St. Vincent Federation. So our budget is limited. But anyway, so that interview kickstarted our more active involvement with the podcast, and afterwards we started seeking out other interviewees, and we got the confidence to reach out to even more people. And since then, we have found a large group of knowledgeable regular interviewees from all over the world for all the various topics related to history of the game. And all this started with our interview with you. And I really want to thank you again for that.
I didn't know that. I didn't realize I didn't know that. No, not a problem. Not a problem.
Yeah,
not a problem.
Kickstarted it all.
So thanks once again.
Can let's forget about St. Vincent. Can you guys be Jack Warner? Just under the table, envelope, 20.
Yeah.
The going rate is 25,000. 25,000 under the table. And I promise you, Shahan, Los Angeles will have the Olympics. I promise you, Paul, that the 2030 World Cup will be in Leeds. I promise you it will be. Just send the money.
Hopefully we'll see you more again down the horizon because we enjoyed these interviews with you. So.
Thank you, man. Thank you guys for the opportunity again.
And thank you once again, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All the best with your podcast, and hope you'll achieve tremendous success.
Shahan, please, again, look for that. Look through your archives. See if you have that Trans World International or, thing from fall of '95. Because I've never seen the whole Mexico game. I've rarely seen any game that I've played for the national team. So if you have that, at least I'd love to see that, to see what the rest of it shows.
I have to dig through my storage. So I'll see. Hopefully, I'll come across it.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you both very much.
Paul.
It's been great.
All right, Sean.
Take care.
Thank you. All
Have
the
a
best.
good one.
Bye.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.